Hey, did you know that when David faced off against Goliath, that historians and archaeologists tell us that the stones he chose were probably the size of a baseball? He chose 5 smooth stones out of a river. Smooth because he was looking for velocity and accuracy. But that was not always the case during wartime. Oftentimes they would choose jagged stones and they would dip them into dung. Just in case they didn't kill their enemy, they could cause an infection. And also they would inscribe messages onto the stones. Like Philistines go home, or, Philistines, your dogs. Anyway, we are investigating the life of David. And the theme of my message today is don't be a Nabal. Now, we've all heard don't be a Karen, right? Or don't be a Kevin. A Karen or a Kevin, they're those entitled individuals who are always complaining, always causing a scene. Well, today, don't be a Nabal. Now, you've all heard of the golden rule, haven't you? The golden rule, do unto others as you would have others do unto you. And that sounds great, doesn't it? Until we are mistreated by others. The moment that someone speaks a hurtful word or does something to cause offense, all of a sudden, our philosophy changes. And all of a sudden, it becomes do unto others as they have done unto you. And you know what? It makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, we can rationalize it and we can justify it in our mind. It seems right. It seems good. It seems just. Solomon, in all of his wisdom in the book of Proverbs, wrote, there is a way that appears to be right, but in the end, it leads to death. And trust me, we cannot see this in ourselves, but others can see it as clear as day. So often, when we are hurt, and then we can't hurt the other person, we can't take it out on them, we have a tendency to take it out on those around us. Yes, in those times where you feel like you've been stepped on, when you feel powerless, and you can't take it out on the person that hurt you, we compensate on others. I've oftentimes said the people that we love the most are the ones that we hurt the easiest, and we do it unconsciously. You see, the problem with getting even is that you're even. The problem with getting even is you're even with the individual who hurt you. And you're even with someone that you don't even like. Now think about this. Why in the world would you want to do that? You're acting like the very person that you don't even like. Well, we're looking at the life of David, some 3,000 years ago. Last week we saw that David, somewhere around 15 years of age, was a giant killer. He put his trust in God. And when he killed Goliath, he became an extremely popular warrior. His popularity dramatically increased among the people of Israel. And the people of the Philistines, they feared him like no other. Well, at first, David was on King Saul's good side. And then all of a sudden, he's on Saul's bad side. He's on the run for his life. He's out in the wilderness with a band of merry men. At this point, David is somewhere between 23 and 25 years of age. We pick up the story in 1 Samuel chapter 25. A certain man in Maon who had property there at Carmel was very wealthy. He had 1,000 goats and 3,000 sheep, which he was shearing in Carmel. Now, right off the bat, we're going, what in the world are you talking about? Well, this man, he was loaded. He was extremely wealthy. His name was Nabal, and his wife's name was Abigail. She was an intelligent and beautiful woman, just like my wife, Suzanne. Do you see how I did that? Anyway, her husband was surly and mean in his dealings. He was a Calebite. In other words, he was kind of harsh when he dealt with people. And he was a Calebite, a descendant of Caleb. But in the Hebrew, it can actually mean translated as dog. And we're going to soon learn that he was a dead dog. Well, in the scripture, names often tell you something about that individual. They tell you about their purpose, what they came to accomplish, like Jesus. The angel said, you shall name him Jesus because he will save his people from their sins. Jesus literally means he saves. And Nabal means fool. And we're going to see in this story that he held up to his name. He was a fool. The scripture says, while David was in the wilderness, he heard that Nabal was shearing sheep. David would have known that. He was a shepherd. So he sent 10 young men and said to them, go up to Nabal at Carmel and greet him in my name. Say to him, long life to you, good health to you and your household, and good health to all that is yours. Now I hear that it is sheep shearing time. When your shepherds were with us, we did not mistreat them. And the whole time they were at Carmel, nothing of theirs was missing. In other words, sheep shearing time, that was party time. It was paycheck time. This was the annual payday. And David said, while your shepherds were out in the fields, we provided protection. We were good to them. Nothing of theirs was missing. And so David is saying, please be good to us. Kindness for kindness. He goes on to say, ask your own servants and they will tell you. Therefore, be favorable toward my men, since we come at a festive time. Please give your servants and your son David whatever you can find for them. In other words, David at this point is making the big ask. Hey, we took care of you. Is there any way that you could take care of us? When David's men arrived, they gave Nabal this message in David's name, and then they waited. And they waited. Nabal finally answered David's servants, who is this David? Who is this son of Jesse? Many servants are breaking away from their masters these days. In other words, this David, he's an outlaw. He's a fugitive. He went rogue. I owe him nothing. I never asked for his help, and I'm not going to pay for his help. He went on to say, why should I take my bread and water and the meat that I have slaughtered for my shearers and give it to men who are coming from who knows where? David's men turned around and went back. When they arrived, they reported every word to David. If this was a movie, at this point, the music would change. It would become ominous. David said to his men, each of you strap on your sword. So they did. And David strapped on his as well. Woo! Talk about some improperly placed frustration, no? Talk about some lack of self-control. Have you ever been there? Where somebody said something or did something and you just totally lost it. It was the straw that broke the camel's back. And you blew up. You said things and you did things that were harmful, that were hurtful. I'm sure you've heard the old saying, hurt people hurt people. Well, in this case, hunted people hunt people. David has some extremely negative talk going on in his mind. He's justifying his actions. Actually, it was the way that they would have behaved in the 11th century BC. You hurt me, I'm justified in hurting you back. Have you ever noticed, just a little side note, that most of the self-talk that goes on in our mind goes for the worst? It never goes for the best. And it is an extremely powerful intervention to understand that your self-talk oftentimes goes for the worst. So one of the servants, and thank goodness for this servant, one of the servants of Nabal told Abigail, Nabal's wife, David sent messengers from the wilderness to give our master his greetings, but he hurled insults at them. And yet these men were very good to us. They did not mistreat us. And the whole time that we were out in the fields, near them, nothing was missing. In other words, this servant went to Abigail and said, Miss Abigail, you need to understand the entire time that we were out in the wilderness, we were vulnerable. We were out in the open. We were exposed. And David's men, they didn't mistreat us. They didn't take anything from us. She went on to say, night and day, they were a wall around us. The whole time we were herding our sheep near them. Now think it over and see what you can do, because disaster is hanging over our master and his whole household. He is such a wicked man that no one can talk to them. The scripture says that Abigail acted quickly. She took 200 loaves of bread, 2 skins of wine, 5 dressed sheep, 5 seahs of roasted grain, about 60 pounds, 100 cakes of raisin, 200 cakes of pressed figs, and loaded them onto donkeys. I mean, just look at the detail that Scripture lists out. And then she told her servants, "Go on ahead, I will follow you." But she did not tell her husband, Nabal. I mean, smart woman. The Scripture says, as she came riding her donkey into a mountain ravine. Now, I want you to picture this in your mind. She's riding into this mountain ravine, and David and his men were descending toward her, and she met them. The Scripture tells us that David took 400 men along with him. David had just said, "It has been useless, all my watching over this fellow's property in the wilderness, so that nothing of his was missing. He has paid me back evil for good. May God deal with David, be it ever so severely, if by morning I leave alive one male of all who belong to him." In other words, David was pumping himself up, and he was pumping his men up for some killing. They were going to go into Nabal's homestead, and they were going to kill every male. When Abigail saw David, she quickly got off her donkey and bowed down before David with her face to the ground. Now, you need to understand how strange that is. Abigail was the wife of a wealthy man. She was an individual of influence. For her to get off her donkey and bow down before someone would have been extremely strange. She fell at David's feet and said, "Pardon your servant." Now, she's not David's servant at this point. She said, "Pardon your servant, my lord, and let me speak to you. Hear what your servant has to say. Please pay no attention, my lord, to that wicked man, Nabal." You see what she's doing? She is treating David like the man that she hopes he will become. She is speaking into David's future. She speaks into his potential. Now, ladies, you need to understand, this works on us guys today. I mean, even when we know what you are doing, it still works. You know, if you were to come up and say, "Hey, honey, I bet you could take that trash out to the front lawn with one arm," I'd be like, "Yeah, watch me, babe. Just watch me do it." I mean, this works on us even today. She went on to say, Nabal is just like his name. His name means fool, and folly goes with him. And as for me, your servant, I did not see the men my Lord sent. And now, my Lord, as surely as the Lord your God lives, and as surely as you live, since the Lord has kept you from bloodshed, and from avenging yourself with your own hands. Do you see what she's doing there? I mean, since the Lord has kept you from bloodshed, the Lord hasn't stopped him yet. I mean, this is kind of like this Jedi mind trick that she's playing on him. In other words, she's slowing him down. And she's saying, David, think about this. Think about the impact that your actions are going to have, not only on the lives of Nabal's families, but on your own life, on your own reign. She wanted to say, may your enemies and all who are intent on harming my Lord be like Nabal. And she went on to say, please forgive your servant's presumption. The Lord your God will certainly make a lasting dynasty for my Lord. You see how she's talking into his future? The Lord will, not maybe, not possibly, not could be, the Lord will. I mean, she is talking with certainty here. Will make a lasting dynasty for my Lord, because you fight the Lord's battles, and no wrongdoing will be found in you as long as you live. Even though someone is pursuing you to take your life. I mean, everybody knows that King Saul is hunting David. So even though someone is pursuing you to take your life, the life of my Lord will be bound securely in the bundle of the living by the Lord your God. And I know what you're going, what in the world does that mean? Okay, that is 11th century BC speak. Okay, basically what it implies is that you take something valuable, like money, okay, you put it in your wallet, and then you wrap all of these cords around it. It's as if you're saving it for something great. And what she's saying to David is, God is saving you for something great. And so you bundle this, whatever it is that's valuable, up with all these cords, and then you stick it in your money belt, or you bury it in the bottom of your purse, all for safekeeping. In other words, David, the Lord your God is going to keep you safe. But the lives of your enemies, he will hurl away as from the pocket of a sling. Woo! Do you see what she's doing there? I mean, she's saying, David, go back to when you killed Goliath. It's almost like this Back to the Future kind of thing. And then the next section, she is basically asking David, what story do you want to tell when this is nothing but a story that you tell? And that's a good question for us. Whatever stage of life that you're in, whatever is going on in your life, what story do you want to tell when this is nothing but a story that you tell? She went on to say to David, when the Lord has fulfilled for my Lord every good thing he promised. Not if. You get that? Look at the certainty. When the Lord has fulfilled every good thing he promised concerning him, and has appointed him ruler over Israel. In other words, David, when you are king, okay, you don't want to have on your conscience this staggering burden of needless bloodshed or having avenged yourself. And when the Lord your God has brought my Lord success, remember your servant. So once again, David, just slow down. Just think about this for a moment, what you're about to do. You're going to have this needless bloodshed on your conscience. And David comes to his senses. Now, just real quick, my friends, when you become emotionally charged, say a conversation is getting heated, between you and a loved one, and that conversation escalates, that's when we do harmful and say destructive things. You need to stop and to calm down. You take a timeout for 50 minutes, 50, because that's how long it takes the body to physiologically calm down. And so when you become emotionally charged, instead of just keep moving forward and having this wake of destruction wherever you go, stop. Go to your happy place. Just calm down for 50 minutes and then come back to the conversation. David said to Abigail, praise be to the Lord, the God of Israel, who has sent you today to meet me. In other words, David recognizes the truth that the Lord sent Abigail. He said, may you be blessed for your good judgment and for keeping me from bloodshed this day and from avenging myself with my own hand. In other words, praise be to God for sending you, Abigail, because I was like putty in your hand. And then David accepted from her hand what she had brought him and said, go home in peace. I have heard your words and granted your request. Then David accepted from her hand what she had brought him and said, go home in peace. I have heard your words and granted your request. When Abigail went to Nabal, he was in the house holding a banquet like that of a king. The real king is hiding in the wilderness. But Nabal, man, he's having a party. He's holding a banquet. The scripture says he was high in spirits and very drunk. So she told him nothing until daybreak. In other words, Nabal, sober up. Then in the morning, when Nabal was sober, his wife told him all these things, and his heart failed him, and he became like a stone. It's believed that he had a stroke. He was comatose. About 10 days later, the Lord struck Nabal, and he died. Then in the morning, Then David sent word to Abigail to asking her to become his wife. The scripture says that Abigail quickly got on a donkey and went to David's messengers. Then David sent word to Abigail asking her to become his wife. Abigail quickly got on a donkey and went with David's messengers and became his wife. And they lived happily ever after. The end. Now, I made that part up. I remember once, I'm going off on a tangent here. I was in Bethlehem. Bethlehem is in the West Bank, and my taxi driver was a Palestinian Muslim. And we were driving in our taxi, and my wife and my 2 daughters were in the back seat. I was in the front seat. He looked and he said to me, "Is that your entire family?" And I said, "Yep, that's them." He goes, "Only one wife?" And I said, "Yes, only one wife." He said, "I have 17 kids and 4 wives." He goes, "I love my kids, but my wives drive me crazy." Well, at this point, Abigail is David's second wife. Now, when you look at this story, you see 3 characters with 3 different responses, but only one hero. Nabal repaid evil for good, and that's just downright maniacal. David repaid evil for evil, and that's predictable. That's what you would expect. But Abigail repaid good for evil, and my friends, that is remarkable. 1,000 years later, Peter, the apostle. 1,000 years later, Peter, the apostle Peter, saw Jesus unjustly treated, unjustly arrested, unjustly condemned. He was beaten, scourged to within an inch of his life. He was nailed to a cross and crucified for us. And Peter could write, "Finally, all of you, be like-minded, be sympathetic, love one another, be compassionate and humble. Do not repay evil with evil or insult with insult. On the contrary, repay evil with blessing, because to this you were called, so that you may inherit a blessing." Now, don't forget, Peter was writing to first century Christians who were being persecuted under Emperor Nero. They were being put to death because of their faith in Jesus. And Peter is saying, do not repay evil with evil. Yeah, Peter, but do you know what they do not repay evil with evil? But Peter, do you know what they said? Do not repay evil for evil. My friends, do not repay evil with evil, not even on social media. And Peter's saying, don't even remain neutral. Peter says, go positive. Be a blessing. Have a blessing. He says, for whoever would love life and see good days must keep their tongue from evil and their lips from deceitful speech. They must turn from evil and do good. They must seek peace and pursue it. And you're probably wondering, where in the world did Peter even get an idea like that? It was in Matthew chapter 5 that Jesus said, you have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. And where did you hear that? It was the old covenant in in Exodus chapter 21, in Leviticus chapter 24, in Deuteronomy chapter 19. But Jesus goes on to say, but I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be sons of your Father who is in heaven. For he makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good, and he sends rain on the just and the unjust. You see, refusing to respond in like kind, my friends, that is the most Christ-like, the most incarnational thing that you can do. See, we're called to be the hands and the feet of Jesus. We're called to love like Jesus. So as I wrap this up, I have 3 quick questions for you. Question number 1, do you really want to be even with someone you don't even like? I mean, ask yourself, do I really want to be even with someone I don't even like? I mean, the answer is no. My friends, even is easy. Why would you want to be even? Move ahead. Be different by refusing to be even or to get even. Secondly, ask yourself, what story do you want to tell? What story do you want to tell? See, David was this close to telling a completely different story. In the season of life that you are in now, with all the joys and with all of the challenges, what story do you want to tell when this is nothing but a story that you tell? See, when we seek revenge, that is so unremarkable. Getting even is so predictable. The story of our life is a story of grace, that God showered that undeserved, unearned, unmerited love and favor upon us. And we're called to live out grace in the same way. And the last question, This is Jesus 101 kind of stuff here, okay? What would it look like for you to return good for evil? What would it look like for you to return good for evil? Not just do nothing. I'm not talking about sticking your head in the sand and pretending nothing happened. No. To show grace, to be proactive, to be a blessing. You see, at Amazing Grace, our mission state is experience the love of Christ, live it, and share it. We call it living love. And you see, this is how our story intersects with the story of salvation. Because isn't that the gospel message? Isn't that exactly what Jesus did for us? He returned good for evil. Even when we, in our sinful nature, crucified him, pushed him away, sinned against him, he continues to love. He continues to forgive. He continues to restore. And he tells us, as followers of Jesus, a new command I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, love one another. My friends, that's unexpected. That's different. That's remarkable. And so I want to challenge you, be different. Write a remarkable story for yourself. And when we repay good for evil, you'll be just like your Father in heaven. And for some of you, it'll set you free. Here's what I mean by that. When you're always trying to get even with someone who hurt you, and you're always going through your mind, I'm going to say this, or I'm going to do this, or this is how I'm going to get even with them, who's the one in charge? They are. They've got control. They've got power over you. But when you return good for evil, when you let it go, you'll be set free. And you'll be like your Father in heaven. Hey, you have a great day, and God bless.